So, since this conversation has gone on, you've ticked through a litany of successes, a litany of programs and policies and philosophies of the president that are supposed to inure to the benefit of the American people. And yet, Washington Post ABC poll this week shows that 62% of Americans feel President Biden hasn't achieved much in office. Why is that? Why does this poll not reflect basically any of the good stuff that you just talked about?
I know you're interviewing me, but can I ask you a question? Is anybody really surprised by that? Like, I'm surprised that you're surprised. That seems to me to be a question that is just so curious, because everybody knows that it takes a long time for things, A, to take root, and for the public to become aware of it for very, very simple reasons. Anybody, you got any moms and dads in here? Y'all got kids, right? You got carpool, you got tons of stuff going on. You got COVID. We have, the trauma that we've gone through in this country for the last 6 years will historically be one of the 6 most traumatic years that this country has gone through in quite a long time. We have these inflection points in history, over time. Maybe there have been 8 or 9 or 10 of them, but the last 6 years will go down in history as being really the most cataclysmic that we've seen, at least in the last 50. Think about when President Biden took office. There was an active insurrection underway in the United States of America. That's not a political statement, it's a fact. That's what the hearings were about. That was actually happening between the time he got elected and the time he took office. You just learned as much about it as you could on January 6th, and you still don't know everything about it, but you now know there was an active insurrection. This president had to put a cabinet together. What did he do? He put really one of the most capable, most diverse cabinets, by the way, which has more women in it than men for the first time in the history of the country, together. We took office at a time when COVID was ravaging the United States of America. Only 2 million people were vaccinated. Now 200 million people were vaccinated. We had an economy that was crashing, which the president stood up with the American Rescue Plan that basically helped feed America, helped make sure that firemen and EMS folks could stand up. And I will remember for you, since everybody here has a short memory, that American citizens were standing in line waiting for food, starting at 3 o'clock in the morning in Manhattan when the food lines didn't open until 12. All right. And then after that, we were basically in a stasis in Washington, D.C., trying to get bills passed. And so when people of America were thinking about all of that stuff and all the challenges that they were going through, they could be forgiven for not really caring too much about what we did in Washington, D.C., because we talk a lot and we don't get anything done. And so now we are 14 months into this. There are 20,000 projects coming out of the ground. And, people go, well, I really hadn't been paying that much attention to it until the president, I think you will agree with me, brought the heat the other night at the State of the Union address. Like my guy, don't like my guy. He showed up in a really big way the other night and delivered 72 minutes of hell, right, about where this country was going and what we did, with people who were sitting in the audience being a little bit less nice than he was trying to be with them as he tried to bring the country together. And people over time will see this. I'm not saying that polls don't matter, but if you go back and look at the polls of all of the presidents over time, you will see that his polls and where he is on approval ratings are not horribly inconsistent with where other presidents were at the time. And you will recall, or I will recall for you, that before the elections a couple of months ago, everybody was, saying this guy's dead. And, there was going to be hell to pay after the midterms. And that hasn't turned out to be true either. The one thing that has turned out to be true about Joseph R. Biden is that he has always been counted out and he has always won. That's what you know. And the only poll that really counts in terms of whether this stuff works or not is if there is another election day, on that day, who they're running against, what the president's vision is, and whether or not we were actually able to hit our marks. And we have demonstrated time and time again on all the things that have mattered to this country when people were running. How many jobs did you create? What's the unemployment rate? Did you really hit your mark? How many pieces of legislation have you passed? How do you compare? When you compare him to every other president at this time in terms of actual success, not perception, but real success, he ranks at the top of the presidents that have ever served.